I think there's a miscalculation here, Gia Dalton said, hesitantly pushing the glossy financial proposal across the polished glass table. She wasn't supposed to speak. Not really. Temporary assistants from the agency were meant to smile, nod, and keep the coffee flowing, not correct math on a multimillion-dollar investment pitch. But there it was, glaring at her in black ink, a decimal point in the wrong place. She didn't care if the man at the head of the table wore a suit that probably cost more than her rent for the year. She wasn't going to let it slide. The man in question, Sullivan Lorne, lifted his eyes from the paper with a slow, unreadable expression. He had the kind of face people noticed: sharp jaw, piercing gray eyes, short dark hair that looked effortlessly styled. He was younger than most CEOs, maybe mid-30s, but the weight of power hung around him like a tailored coat. "You found an error?" he asked, voice calm but curious. Gia swallowed. "On page 6. The projected ROI uses the wrong multiplier. If you carry the actual growth rate across the 5-year projection, it's off by about $700,000. The room went dead silent. One of the executives cleared his throat. "That's not possible." Gia didn't flinch. "It is, I double-checked." Sullivan turned the page, scanning it for a few seconds, then another few. He reached for a pen, did a quick calculation on the side margin, and paused. His eyes flicked back to her. "You're right." She blinked. "I am, you are," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Everyone out, except her." The suits exchanged glances but didn't question it. Within moments, the boardroom emptied, leaving Gia alone with the man whose empire she'd just corrected. Sullivan studied her quietly. "What's your name, Gia?" "Gia Dalton. I'm with Temp Core Staffing. I'm just here for the week." "You're not an accountant," she shook her head. "Math minor. I just notice things." He stood and walked to the massive window behind him, hands in his pockets. The Manhattan skyline glittered in the afternoon sun, but Gia couldn't stop watching him. "I've had 5 people look at that proposal," he said. "None of them caught it." "Well, maybe they were too close to it." He turned to her. "Or maybe they weren't looking hard enough." She didn't know what to say to that. He walked back toward her, his steps slow, deliberate. "You just saved me $700,000. I didn't mean to embarrass anyone." "You didn't," he said. "You impressed me." Gia's stomach flipped. This felt dangerous, not in a bad way, but in the way that warned her to be careful, like standing at the edge of a cliff just to see the view. "I should probably get back to the front desk," she said, backing away. "You're not going back to the front desk." His voice was firm, decisive. "You're working with me now." "I what?" "I need someone who sees what others don't, someone who isn't afraid to speak up. You just proved you're that person. I'm not qualified, you'll learn." There was something about the way he said it, like he was used to getting what he wanted. Not in an arrogant way, in a way that made people say yes without really knowing why. Gia hesitated. "Are you sure?" "I'm always sure." And just like that, she was pulled from the background of the office into Sullivan Lorne's world. The next few days passed in a blur. Private meetings, confidential documents, late-night strategy sessions. He didn't treat her like an assistant. He asked for her opinion, listened, challenged her. And she surprised herself by rising to meet it all. Friday evening, after the rest of the office had cleared out, Sullivan leaned against the edge of his desk and looked at her with a quiet intensity. "You didn't just save me money, Gia. You reminded me why I started this company in the first place, to work with people who think. Who care." She shifted on her feet, unsure how to respond. "I didn't do anything special." "You don't see it yet," he said, his voice softer now. "But you will." She grabbed her coat. "I should go my trains in 30 minutes. I'll have my driver take you." "That's really not necessary, Gia." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Let me do something for you." The way he said her name made her feel like it mattered, like she mattered. She nodded. The car ride was quiet but charged. When they pulled up outside her building, she turned to him. "Thanks for the ride." "Gia?" "Yeah," he hesitated. "Have dinner with me tomorrow." Her heart tripped. "Like a date?" His eyes didn't waver. "Yes." She searched his face, but there was no game there, no agenda, just a man who had everything but maybe wanted something real. Okay, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes. He exhaled like he hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. 7 o'clock, dress however you want. I'll pick you up. Gia floated up the stairs to her apartment, her pulse still racing. She'd corrected a Millionaire's math error, and now he wanted to take her to dinner. Gia opened her closet for the third time, staring at the same row of clothes that had done just fine for her life up until now. But now there was a dinner with Sullivan Lorne waiting on the other side of this decision. And suddenly, her wardrobe looked like it belonged to someone who didn't expect to be noticed. She reached for a navy wrap dress she'd worn only once, still tagged from a sample sale she'd wandered into on a rainy afternoon. The fabric was soft, the neckline modest but flattering. She pulled her hair into a loose twist, dabbed on lip color, and stepped back from the mirror. It wasn't about impressing him, not really. It was about not shrinking from this. At exactly 7, a black town car pulled up in front of her building. Gia stepped outside and immediately spotted him leaning against the open door, hands in the pockets of a charcoal coat. He looked at her like she'd walked out of a dream. "You clean up well," she said before she could stop herself. Sullivan's mouth curved. "So do you." He offered her his hand and she took it, climbing into the backseat of a car that still smelled like leather and quiet power. The city glided past her window, but she couldn't stop glancing at him. He wasn't wearing a tie tonight, just the open collar of a crisp white shirt, and somehow that made him look even more deliberate. Like he chose this night and her with full awareness. "Where are we going?" Gia asked. "You'll see," she arched a brow. "That's cryptic." "I thought you liked noticing things." He wasn't wrong. The car pulled into a gated courtyard beneath a building she'd only ever seen in magazines. It wasn't just expensive, it was exclusive. A valet opened her door before she could even reach for the handle. Inside, the restaurant was tucked away on the top floor, candlelit and walled in glass. The skyline stretched out beneath them, glittering in silence. There were only 6 tables, and only one was occupied by them. "You rented out the whole place?" Gia asked, stunned. "I didn't want to share the view." She sat down slowly, still absorbing the sheer scale of it. "You really don't do anything halfway." "I don't have time for halfway." A waiter approached with 2 menus, but Sullivan waved them off gently. "Just bring out what chef recommends." Gia blinked. "You trust someone else to choose your meal," he shrugged. "If I hire someone to do a job, I let them do it." She tilted her head, studying him. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" She hesitated. "Someone colder, more inaccessible. And yet here you are, here I am." The first course arrived, something delicate and citrusy arranged like sculpture on a porcelain plate. Gia took a bite and closed her eyes. "Okay, I take it back. Letting someone else decide was the right move." He smiled, watching her. "You don't pretend to like things, that's rare." "I'm not very good at pretending." He leaned forward slightly. "Good, neither am I." Their conversation drifted from food to books, to the cities they'd both visited to the ones they hadn't. She asked him if he ever missed being unknown. He asked if she ever wanted to disappear from the city entirely. "I used to think I'd leave," Gia admitted. "Move somewhere quieter, but I think I'd miss the chaos." "I think the chaos suits you." She raised an eyebrow. "That's not always a compliment." "With you, it is." The second course came, richer, darker. The candlelight flickered between them like it knew a secret. Gia set down her fork. "Why did you really invite me tonight?" Sullivan didn't flinch. "Because I haven't stopped thinking about you." Her breath caught, but she held his gaze. "That day in the boardroom," he continued, "you weren't intimidated, you weren't trying to impress anyone, you just told the truth." "I didn't do it for attention." "I know," he said. "That's exactly why it got mine." She looked down at her plate, unsure what to do with the way her chest tightened. "This isn't my world, Sullivan." He reached across the table, resting his hand over hers. "It could be." Gia met his eyes. "That's not a promise you get to make." "I'm not making promises. I'm asking if you're willing to see where this goes." She didn't answer right away. The easy thing would be to say no, to protect herself before anything could matter. But the truth was, she wanted to know what it felt like to be wanted without being needed, to be chosen by someone who had everything. Okay, she said finally. Let's see. The rest of the night unfolded like something out of someone else's life. Dessert was served with crystal flutes of something that sparkled. They stayed until the candles burned low and the city outside settled into a rare hush. When they returned to her building, Sullivan walked her to the door. I meant what I said, he told her. You see things other people miss. And you're not what you look like on paper, she replied. He nodded once. I hope not. Then, unexpectedly, he leaned in and brushed his lips against her slow, sure, and somehow more intimate than anything the night had held. When he pulled back, he didn't say another word. He just turned and walked back to the car, leaving her standing in the doorway with her heart pounding and her hand still tingling from where he'd held it. 3 weeks had passed since that night on the rooftop restaurant, and Gia hadn't once been back to the front desk. She barely recognized her days anymore. Her mornings began in the upper executive wing of Lorne Global Holdings, at a desk positioned just outside Sullivan's office, where she was now his direct strategic assistant, an unofficial title, but one spoken with quiet deference by the others in the building. She didn't have a nameplate, but she had access to files that required biometric clearance. She wasn't technically on payroll yet, but she'd been handed a sleek black card with no limit and told, use it when you need to. She hadn't. Not once. But she kept it in her wallet anyway, like a secret too heavy to throw away. Sullivan hadn't kissed her again. He hadn't needed to. Every moment they spent together was weighted, charged. He listened to her differently than anyone ever had. He challenged her but never dismissed her. She pushed back, he welcomed it, she was falling. Slowly, then all at once, she barely knew what to do with it. On a quiet Thursday afternoon, he called her into his office. Close the door, he said without looking up. She did and crossed to his desk. What's going on? He stood and walked to the window, arms folded. I want you to come with me to a meeting. You've taken me to plenty of meetings. Not like this one. He turned to face her. It's in Geneva, 48 hours, we leave tonight. She blinked. Switzerland, it's a key acquisition, I want your eyes on it. I need a passport. There's one waiting for you downstairs, he paused. I had it expedited, just in case. She stared at him. You had a passport made for me, you're too valuable not to travel with. Gia's stomach turned over. That's not a small thing to do for someone. I don't do small things, she hesitated. I need to pack, already handled. Your apartment was accessed this morning. A personal shopper handled the wardrobe, her voice sharpened. You went into my home. I sent someone discreet. I had your keys from when you dropped them that night in the car, you didn't even notice. She stepped back, her pulse kicking. That's a lot. I wanted to make it easy for you to say yes. She crossed her arms, her jaw tightening. That's not how you do that. Sullivan's expression didn't shift, but something in his shoulders changed. He looked at her differently now, less like a man who was used to controlling the world, and more like one who just realized he couldn't control her. I thought I was doing something considerate. You don't get to make that call for me, he nodded slowly. You're right. I crossed a line. The silence thickened between them. I'm not used to people telling me no, he admitted. You're going to have to get used to it if I'm going to stay in this. He stepped closer, but not too close. Are you going to stay in this? I haven't decided yet, and then softer. You made me feel like I mattered, not because of what I wore or who I knew, because I saw something others didn't. That meant more than you realize. I haven't forgotten that. Then don't treat me like someone you can manage, he nodded once. Understood. The tension between them didn't dissolve, but it shifted. Became something that pulsed just beneath the surface, no longer sharp, but still present. That night they boarded a jet so silent Gia thought her ears might never pop. The cabin was more luxurious than any hotel she'd ever stayed in. Cream leather seats, mahogany accents, a private bedroom in the back, though she didn't dare even glance toward it. Sullivan sat across from her, his laptop open but untouched. I didn't think you'd come, he said finally. I almost didn't. What changed your mind? I wanted to see if you'd ask me to. He leaned back in his seat. And if I hadn't, then I'd know exactly what I meant to you, he nodded. I'm still learning how to do this. Do what? This, us. Whatever it is we're building, she studied him. You've built empires, Sullivan. Why is this so hard? Because I've never had to build something that could walk away. The jet touched down at dawn. By early morning, she was stepping into a boardroom overlooking Lake Geneva, sitting beside Sullivan at a table of men in tailored suits and sharp accents. During the presentation, she noticed a clause buried in a footnote one that would give the acquisition partner veto power over key hires. She slid a note across the table without looking at him. He read it, then looked up. Page 14, he said to the room. That clause comes out. The room stilled. The lead partner cleared his throat. That's standard. It won't be standard in my company. No one argued again. Afterward, as they walked out to the car, he turned to her. You saw it before I did. I always read the fine print. He held her gaze. I need you beside me more than I thought. An hour later, they were back at the hotel, and Gia stepped into a suite that looked like a movie set floor-to-ceiling glass, marble floors, a dining table already set for two. I asked them to prepare something light, Sullivan said, loosening his cuffs. You haven't eaten since the airport. She sat down slowly. You really don't do anything half-measure, I've been told that. They ate quietly at first, the soft hum of the city below filling the silence. Then she set her fork down. You said earlier you're still learning how to do this. Yes. Then let me teach you. He looked up, surprised. Teach me? You can't buy your way into something real. You can't helicopter into someone's life and rearrange it to suit you. I'm not trying to control you. Then stop acting like I'm an extension of your empire. The words landed hard, but he didn't deflect. I don't want you to be a part of my empire, he said finally. I want you to be the reason I change it. Gia froze. Sullivan stood, walked around the table, and knelt beside her chair. His hand found hers, not demanding, just steady. You're not here because I want someone to follow me, he said. You're here because I've never wanted to be led by anyone until now. She stared at him, trying to process the gravity of what he'd just said. I don't know what comes next, she whispered. Then let's figure it out together, and just like that, something between them cracked open. Not with fire, but with certainty. The air was crisp when they returned to New York, a late winter chill brushing against Gia's cheeks as Sullivan's driver opened the door for her outside Lorne Global's private terminal. She stepped out slowly, still adjusting to the surreal rhythm of her new life, one that had unfolded without warning, one she hadn't planned, but somehow still felt closer to her than anything she'd known. Sullivan walked beside her in silence. Not the heavy kind, but the grounded sort that comes after something has shifted. Their time in Geneva had rewritten the space between them, no longer veiled in tension or unspoken questions. There was clarity now, but clarity, she was learning, came with its own weight. Inside the car, she folded her hands in her lap. I need to go home tonight, he glanced at her. I wasn't going to ask you to come with me, her lips curved faintly, but you wanted to. I always want to. She looked out the window, letting the city blur past. I need to remember who I was before all of this, just for a night, he didn't argue. I understand. He reached over, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. Not possessive, not performative, just a quiet gesture filled with something that made her chest ache. When the car pulled up to her building, she hesitated before opening the door. You've never explained it, she said. Why me? Why pull someone from nowhere into the middle of your life? Sullivan didn't move. Because I've spent years surrounded by people who only speak when it benefits them. You didn't ask for anything, you just told the truth. I still don't know if I belong in your world. Maybe, he said, or maybe I want to build a world that fits you. She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped out and walked toward the entrance without looking back. Inside her apartment, everything looked smaller than she remembered. Not because of size, but because of how much she'd changed. She stood in the middle of the room, letting silence wrap around her. There were no marble floors here, no curated meals or private cars. But there was something else, something she hadn't realized she missed. She kicked off her shoes, pulled her hair down, and curled up on the couch with a blanket and a cup of tea. Her phone buzzed hours later. It was a number she didn't recognize, but she answered anyway. "Gia Dalton?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes. I'm calling from Whitaker and Lane. Mr. Lorne asked us to deliver something to you personally. You don't need to be home. We've been instructed to leave it with your doorman." She blinked. "What is it?" "I'm not at liberty to say, ma'am." The line went dead. 20 minutes later, her doorman called up. "Miss Dalton, there's a package down here for you. It's large." She took the elevator down and found a navy blue box nearly as tall as she was, wrapped in a satin ribbon and bearing no label except a gold embossed card tucked beneath the bow. She opened it slowly. Inside was a framed blueprint and architectural rendering, meticulously detailed, of a single-story building with a storefront and a sign above the entry. Dalton & Co. Beneath it, a handwritten note in Sullivan's unmistakable script. "I remember what you said in Geneva, about never pretending. This space is yours, no strings, no expectations, just the foundation if you ever decide to build something that's yours." Her hands trembled slightly as she lowered the note. She hadn't told him about her dream of opening a small consulting firm. She'd only mentioned once offhandedly that she hated the idea of being absorbed by someone else's machine, and he'd remembered she didn't call him. Not that night. Instead, she went to sleep with the blueprint leaning against her bedroom wall and her heart pulling in two directions, one toward comfort, one toward courage. The next morning, she walked into Lorne Global's tower not through the employee entrance, but the front doors. Security waved her through without question now. She took the executive elevator and stepped out onto the top floor. Sullivan's door was already open. He looked up from his desk, brow lifting. "You're early." "I didn't sleep much." "Is that a complaint?" She shook her head. "I read the blueprint." He stood. "And you listened." "I always do." She stepped closer. "You gave me something that was mine, not yours, mine. That was the point." She looked at him for a long moment. "You're not easy, I know, but you're honest. And I can build from that." A flicker of something crossed his face, something close to vulnerability. "Does that mean you're staying?" "I'm not walking away from the first person who ever made me feel like I could change the rules instead of just surviving them." He stepped around the desk and reached for her hands. "I don't want to be your escape." "You're not," she said. "You're the one who reminded me I was never trapped. I just didn't have the door open yet." He pulled her close, hands resting at her waist, eyes tracing every inch of her face with quiet reverence. "I've never wanted anyone to stay," he said, voice low. "Until you." Then he kissed her, not like the first time, not like someone unsure of what came next. This kiss was full, deep, and certain. Like he already knew the answer. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "So what now? We build something," he said. "Together. And if we fail, we won't," she smiled, confident as always. "No," he said quietly, "just sure about you." Later that month, the ribbon cutting for Dalton & Co. made the business section of 3 major newspapers. Not because it was a small consulting firm in Midtown, but because Sullivan Lorne was there not as owner, not as investor, but as the man holding the hand of the woman walking into the future on her own terms. And when she stepped up to the podium to thank the people who helped her get there, she only looked at one person in the crowd. He didn't need a title in her company. He already had one in her heart. The day the first client contract was signed at Dalton & Co. Gia found herself standing in the middle of her new office, barefoot, the carpet still stiff from delivery, holding a pen she hadn't even realized she'd been gripping. The signature on the dotted line wasn't just ink, it was proof. Proof that she hadn't just been a temporary assistant who got lucky. She'd built something real, something that had come from her own instincts, not from Sullivan's influence. She turned when she heard the soft knock. Sullivan leaned against the doorframe, hands in his coat pockets. His tie was slightly askew, his gaze steady. He hadn't been by the office since the launch party, choosing instead to let her have the space she said she needed to breathe. But now she could tell he wasn't here for business. "Didn't expect to see you before 6, she said. "I couldn't wait," She crossed her arms, but her smile crept through. Something wrong? No, something right. He stepped in, closing the door behind him, and she noticed the folder tucked beneath his arm. I brought something, he said. I already signed the contract. This isn't about your business. He set the folder on her desk and slid it toward her. She opened it slowly, her eyes scanning the top page. A deed to a building in Brooklyn Heights, not commercial, residential. Her fingers hovered over the paper. What is this? It's ours, he said. If you want it, she blinked. Sullivan, I know you don't want to be swept. You don't want grand, empty gestures, but this isn't about giving you something. It's about building something with you. You have your space. This is ours. She closed the folder gently and looked at him. I didn't ask for this, I know, but I'm not asking you to take it. I'm asking you to live in it, with me. Gia walked around the desk, crossing the distance between them. You mean move in together? Yes. And you're sure? I've never been more. She took a breath, searching his eyes. They weren't clouded with uncertainty now. Whatever part of him had once needed to control every outcome was gone. This was a man offering her something not because he had to, but because he wanted to share space, not own it. I'll need a proper closet, she said. It's got and sunlight, floor-to-ceiling windows in every room. She stepped closer. And a say in the decor. His voice was quiet. Only yours. She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. Then yes. His shoulders relaxed in a way she hadn't seen before, not even in Geneva. He kissed her forehead, then rested his chin there for a moment, as if grounding himself. We'll take our time, he said. No rush. Just us? I like that. Later that evening, they walked into the brownstone together. It was still empty, the walls bare, the floors polished but untouched. He led her up the stairs to the third floor, then stopped in front of a closed door. It's not much yet, he said. But I had something done. He opened the door. The room was filled with canvases, some blank, some half-covered in brushstrokes. A full wall of natural light poured in through high arched windows, a table in the corner lined with charcoal, brushes, and oils. I remembered what you said. About how you used to sketch, he said. You said you stopped because no one ever asked to see what you created. She turned, her throat tightening. You remembered that? I remember everything that matters. She stepped into the room, running her hand over the edge of the canvas. I didn't think I missed it, she said. You didn't forget it. You just stopped believing there was room for it. She looked over her shoulder at him. There is now. They spent the next 2 months turning the brownstone into something that didn't look like either of them, but instead looked like both. She brought plants and oversized mugs. He brought books and warm lighting. They argued once about whether to hang a vintage clock or a modern sculpture in the hallway, and ended up keeping both. One evening, as Gia was standing in the kitchen barefoot again, stirring pasta with one hand and a glass of wine in the other, Sullivan came up behind her and kissed her shoulder. I want to ask you something, he said, his voice low. She turned, spoon still in her hand. Now, he nodded. He reached into the pocket of his slacks and pulled out a small velvet box, but when he opened it, it wasn't a ring, it was a key to a safety deposit box. She raised a brow. Mysterious. I've never wanted tradition, he said, not for the sake of it, but if you ever want to wear the ring, the one I had made when I realized I couldn't picture a single morning without you in it, it's there. Waiting. Tears rose before she could stop them. He cupped her cheek. This isn't a proposal, not yet. This is me saying I'm not going anywhere, whether we marry next year or never, whether you wear my name or keep your own. Whatever you want, Gia, I just want to build it with you. She set the spoon down, took his hand, and pressed it to her heart. I want everything, and I want it with you. He kissed her then, not like the man who had once owned boardrooms and cities, but like a man who finally understood that love wasn't something to win, it was something to choose. Again and again. 1 year later, Gia stood at the front of a small garden tucked behind their brownstone, wearing a dress she'd found in a boutique no one knew existed. There were only 20 guests. No press. No fanfare. Sullivan stood beneath the archway of ivy waiting for her. When she reached him, he didn't say anything at first. He just held her hands in his, eyes never leaving hers. I once thought power meant never needing anyone, he said. Then I met you, she smiled, tears slipping down her cheeks. And I once thought love meant losing myself. Until you showed me I could be more. They said their vows in words only they understood. Promises made not just for a future, but for all the moments that had already changed them. Afterward, they danced barefoot beneath string lights, the night filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and music that drifted into the quiet streets of Brooklyn. And when the last guest left and the candles had burned low, Sullivan carried her upstairs, into the home they'd made together. Not a palace, not a tower, just a life built day by day together.